Welcome to Silicon Valley Successes. On today's show, we have Gerry Baranano. He is the founder of Tech Futures Group and serves as both as the director and as an entrepreneur in residence. In his career, Gerry was the VP of Sales and Marketing from companies ranging from Fortune 100s all the way to startups. And he was instrumental in selling a technology startup for over $3 billion. Gerry is a graduate of Yale University and has an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business. And you're going to meet him in a moment. Gerry, welcome to Silicon Valley Successes.
My pleasure, thank you.
So Gerry, tell us, what is Tech Futures Group?
So let me give you the 1-minute intro. Tech Futures Group is a nonprofit. We provide free business advice to tech companies. Our services are free. We don't take equity and we don't accept cash. But everybody on our side gets paid, and we're funded by the Small Business Administration, federal program, and the state of California as well. So the way it works is you apply to Tech Futures Group. If we like what we see, we don't accept everyone. We'll pair you with an entrepreneur in residence, serial entrepreneurs, had a good exit or two. They provide strategic CEO level advice, and then bring in our specialty advisors if you need them. IP attorneys, someone who helps with manufacturing, we've done a lot of medical, someone who will build a financial model so you understand your business better and are better prepared for pitches to VCs and angels. We help with that. And then we also help with government grants. We've been very, very successful with government grants.
That sounds like an amazing amount of services that you offer to startups. So if a startup passes your screening process, are they able to access all of that, or how do you match them up with what's a best fit for them?
So we try to match them up to the right entrepreneur in residence. The serial entrepreneurs had a good exit or two. We do it based on their interests, then their experience, and what the startup says they need. That person is the lead advisor. He's the one who controls a relationship with a client. Very similar to what a national account manager would do in a large organization. They're responsible for the entire relationship between the two companies. So that EIR does that, and they then bring in the specialty advisors if both the entrepreneur in residence and the client decide they need them.
So there'll be one person, an entrepreneur in residence,
right,
and he will kind of manage that relationship,
right,
and through getting to know the startup more and more, we'll decide, what
they need next. So he may say, I'm really worried about your IP position, your intellectual property position. Let's introduce you to Pat, who's the IP attorney. He will then take it from there and discuss all the issues around intellectual property and make sure that the startup is covered. And then they may say later, in order to prepare for investor presentation, you really need to have a good financial model and projections. And perhaps the startup as an engineer or somebody else doesn't understand that part of the business. So we'll bring in somebody, one of our people, who will actually build a financial model for that startup. The one that most people like, and the one that they really, really appreciate, is the government grants, because this is money you don't have to pay back, and they don't take equity. So it's free money, so to speak. And it can be a significant sum.
So if someone wants government grants, or you help them with government grants, what does that process look like?
It's a pretty long process. So we focus on something called Small Business Innovation Research Grants, otherwise known as SBIR. So the Small Business Innovation Research is a set aside only for small companies, not for nonprofits. So it's for-profit companies, and they have to have a technology risk in what they're doing. The government will then say, we're looking at someone to solve this issue. Can you solve it? And then the client or the small company will say, yes, we have an approach to solving it. They fill out an application and then that's reviewed by the folks in Washington. And then the application is then either accepted or rejected.
So you'll help the startup kind of fine-tune or adjust their current project to fit these grants for a better chance of getting approved?
Right, and we'll help them. We don't write the grant for them, but we'll review it, and so we'll help them understand that this part of the grant really is important and they're not spending enough time on it. The grants have a limit. They're 15 pages. So, you know, if you spend way too much time on the technology and not enough time on commercialization, you probably won't get the grant. So we'll say reduce that, increase this, add a picture. You know, we'll make it very easy. We'll also help them understand it's really important to get to know the program officer of the grant organization. So the biggest one is DoD, Department of Defense. They'd have about 40% of all SBIRs. And then the other big ones are National Institute of Health for Medical and National Science Foundation, which is sort of a catch-all.
So, I mean, this grant sounds amazing. How far along does a company have to be in order to try to reach out and get a grant?
They can be very early. So you typically have to have at least 2 people. 3 is probably preferable. But you have to have someone who's a principal investigator, who's sort of the technical person, and then you typically have to have a business person. But they can be very early. It's really for organizations or companies that have a technical challenge and a technical risk. It can help the small company solve that technical risk by applying for the grant, and then by going through the grant, they'll solve the technical risk to a very large degree, and the government pays for that.
So these grants, I mean, the process seems very long. Are we talking 6 months, a year? What's a normal time frame? And if I'm a startup and I'm relying on this money to keep going, do most of these companies kind of just fold because it takes so long, or what does it look like?
It's not fast. So it does take about 6 months from the moment you apply to the moment that you know whether you've gotten in, and then you typically negotiate the amount they give you, and then you'll get the money roughly 3 months after that. So 6 to 9 months before you see the money. There's 2 phases. So phase 1 is just proof of concept. Can you do it, right? You don't have to actually do it. It could be a bunch of formulas. It could be an algorithm. It could be a prototype, right? It's can you do it? And that's about a year is what they'll give you to do that. And it's a maximum of $225,000. But phase 2, which is really much more interesting, is you have to actually do it. You have to produce either a prototype or something that they can say, oh yeah, you've done it. And that's $1 million. And it's 2 years. So it's a really great program for a lot of startups. Not for everybody, but it is for a lot of our startups.
Let's go back and talk about Tech Futures a little bit.
Yeah.
Where is Tech Futures located? And tell me about the team that you work with.
Okay, so Tech Futures Group is a virtual group in the main. So we have 2 staff people. We're both located in Berkeley, downtown Berkeley at the WeWork building. And then we have about 10 or 11 other advisors. They're located throughout the region. The region we support starts as far south as Santa Cruz County, all the way to Nevada, and then all the way north to the Oregon border. And east, obviously, Nevada, all the way up. So we do mostly the Bay Area. That's where we started. But we just took northern eastern region, which includes Sacramento and points north and east. So we have a very, very large territory.
So then does a startup actually have to physically be in Berkeley to work with you, or can they be anywhere in this region?
Yeah, they can be anywhere in this region. So they can be, you know, in Sacramento and Truckee and San Jose and Mountain View. They just have to have someone working in this area, and then they also have to they have to be American companies. We don't really work with foreign companies.
Okay. Could one of the founders be a foreigner, or both have to be American?
Yeah, the foreign part gets a little tricky. Okay. So yeah, I mean the company ownership has to be 51% American. So one of the founders or several of the founders could be foreign, but the investors have to be. At least all of the owners, all of the owners combined have to have 51% have to be American.
Tell me about the screening process.
Yeah.
Do I just send in an application and then you look at it, or is there more to it?
Yes, there's an application process. You apply online. The application is free. It's very standard. We haven't done anything fancy with the application at all. It's 20 questions. You know, tell me about your team, tell me about your business, tell me about your market, what's the problem you're solving, what do you need from Tech Futures Group, or sort of the idea of the kind of questions we ask. We review those roughly weekly, and then we'll get back to them and either say, yeah, we're forwarding it on to one of the entrepreneurs in residence. So we'll pick someone who we think is good fit for that company or that technology. We send the application to the entrepreneur in residence. They make the final decision.
Oh.
So the entrepreneurs residents are scattered throughout the region. They're not in Berkeley, and none of them are actually, except for me. But they basically are down here in the Silicon Valley. They're in the peninsula, San Francisco, points north, Sacramento. So we have them spread out throughout the region. They meet with the clients typically in person a couple times just to get to know people, but also by phone or WebEx or Zoom or something like that. It's fine too.
How do you find these entrepreneurs in residence for the Tech Futures Group?
Mostly word of mouth. So there's a lot of people who come up to me and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I say, yeah, I know. It's a lot of fun. So most of the entrepreneurs in residence have been with Tech Futures Group from very early days. And I think that's one of the success factors for Tech Futures Group is we keep our advisors for a long time. So the entrepreneurs in residence have been with us, some of them 7 years, 6 years. We were founded in 2012. So some of them are from the original 2012 group. And then we hired a couple in 2015, and we hired one in 2016, 17, and the rest have been here for the whole time. Now,
tell me about the formation of Tech Futures Group.
Yeah.
Are you one of the original founders, from my understanding?
That's right. So yeah, it was interesting. I was an advisor for Small Business Development Center. I think one of the guests here will be an SBDC advisor. Small Business Development Center is SBDC. And I was asked to be the advisor for the national labs. So Sandia National Labs and Lawrence Livermore. As you can imagine, they had a lot of technology, but they didn't have advisors who understood the tech business. So I was an advisor for them. I did a couple presentations, and one of the people in the audience was a very, very innovative person from LA who had just moved up here. He was an SBDC director in Los Angeles and moved up to the Bay Area. He said, I got together afterwards, and he said, why is there no tech group here in the Bay Area? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, let's start one. So we started it. He sold it into the SBDC, which is, not an easy task to do, frankly. He did a great job. I think the world of the man. His name is James Alva. So James did a lot of that, sort of internal selling, and then we started it about a year later, so roughly mid-2012. So
was Tech Futures Group, in a way, kind of your own startup?
Yeah, well, it was one of them. This is sort of a nonprofit, so it's a little different. Yes.
So tell me more about introducing them to IP lawyers, all these types of introductions that you can offer these startups that are going through Tech Futures Group. I mean, tell me about all these resources that are available for them, and maybe even a success case.
Okay, sure. So, so the kind of special, so we have the entrepreneur in residence, the lead advisor sort of manages the relationship, and then we have these specialty advisors who get called in when necessary. So one of them is an IP attorney. We don't prosecute a patent for somebody. That's way too expensive, but we'll make sure that that team or that individual understands the issues that are going on with intellectual property, not just patents, but copyrights, trademarks, agreements you might have with a development team. If the agreement doesn't say it's your property, you can run into problems later. Now the law has changed, so things are a little bit different, and we're still trying to figure it out. The state law has changed. So he does a lot of the sort of, let's make sure you're not making decisions that you're later going to have to either undo or change somewhere later. So that's Pat Riley. He's the IP attorney. We have another individual whose name is Gerry Baranano, who's our manufacturing expert. He has a lot of experience in manufacturing, both privately and also with a group where he has identified a lot of manufacturers located locally, so in the Bay Area or beyond, who can help mostly with really early manufacturing. You know, a lot of the later stage or the scaling of the manufacturing gets taken overseas, but for the early stages, it really makes sense to have somebody locally. So he helps with that. We have a financial team that does nothing but develop a very complete Excel spreadsheet that includes projections and will spit out a balance sheet, an income statement, and a use of funds statement so that the entrepreneur understands their business better. And frankly, it's a requirement if you're going to be raising significant sums from angel groups or VCs. We find that an extremely valuable service for our clients, and it was one we added later. We didn't have it initially, so we added that later. And then the last one, of course, is the grants, government grants, SBIR, STTR. We have 2 advisors for that. One focuses on National Institutes of Health, medical mostly, National Science Foundation, and then some of the smaller ones, like the Energy, DOE, Department of Energy, Department of Education, some of the smaller ones. And then there's another individual who does DOD, NASA, and he's really, really good about not only the government grants, but then getting in and selling your product to the Department of Defense, which would be a great outcome for most small businesses.
So right now on Silicon Valley Successes, we're going to take a brief break to talk about, if you want more information on Gerry and our other guests, please visit siliconvalleysuccesses.com, visit us on Facebook and our LinkedIn group, where we provide up-to-date and more information than you just see in these videos. So let's get back to Gerry. Gerry, we've talked about government grants, we've talked about prepping companies for funding, we've talked about all these amazing mentors from IP to manufacturing, and these are some amazing resources all in one group. Could you please give us an example of a company that has gone through Tech Futures Group over the years?
Sure. So there was a company that was called WG Sigma. They later changed their name to ServiceAid. And they came to Tech Futures Group, I think, 2.5 years ago. We paired them up. They had a SaaS model, and they had an AI, artificial intelligence engine. So we hooked them up with Han Wang, who has experience with enterprise software type of startups. And they were focused on the construction industry. And they were their product, their artificial intelligence, machine learning data product, was helping builders who had big buildings to build figure out where, sort of alert them to problems that were happening on site or were about to happen on site, so they could predict some of the problems. And Han said, fine, let's try it out. And it turned out it didn't work well, right? So they couldn't get traction, nobody was really interested, they couldn't raise money. So Han said, well, why don't you do some thought pieces, right? Write something so you're a thought leader, people read about you and know about you. They did that, that didn't really work. He said, what about grants? Put them in contact with our grant person. They said, there's not really much out there for this, at least at this time. So that didn't work. So Han sat down with them and had a couple of very long strategic meetings with their entire management team. And they thought, well, why don't we change the product and the market, which is extremely risky. And what they came up with was IT services. So for troubleshooting for IT problems, their artificial engine could be tweaked, could be changed to focus on that rather than building problems or building site problems. They went after that, and then it turns out they got a lot of traction. People loved it. They went after it. Han then helped them with a pitch deck, helped them with the financial model, had our individuals come in with the financial model, put them in contact with some investors that might be good, and they ended up raising $12 million, which was great for them. They ended up hiring a bunch of people. I don't remember the number, but they ended up hiring a bunch of people, so it was really great for them. I mean, they were just super happy.
So in a situation like that, when does Tech Futures back away and say, okay, now you're kind of outgrown us, or you're on your own, or you've graduated?
Yeah. So we don't graduate. So yeah, so we don't ever do that officially. So we let what ends up happening sort of over time is there's not as much communication. So the Han will reach out to service aid and say, do you want to talk? And they might say, we're fine, or maybe they have a special need. So over time, the relationship always remains, but there's a lot less time spent. So if you were to graph the amount of hours one of our EIRs spends with a client, it's a lot initially. So the graph sort of goes down, a lot initially, then less and less, and then there's blips. If something happens, they'll need that. So that's what they're doing.
So when you're saying initially there's this huge kind of spike in the amount of hours needed, what is kind of the maximum hours that a startup might ask from your entrepreneur in residence or from your team? Is there a maximum, or is there kind of this non-discussed range of you're now taking a little bit too much, or what does that look like?
So it's very much up to the entrepreneur in residence. So the way we work with them, they're not employees, they're 1099s. So we contract with them for a certain number of hours a month, and it's not a lot. It's maybe 10, 12, 15 hours a month. It's not a lot. So we contract with them for that amount, and then they sort of manage the business as they see fit. I keep an eye on it. If it becomes a lot, I don't want to give a number, but if it becomes a lot, then I'll talk to the EIR and I'll say, what's going on? Why are we spending so much time with this client? But most of the time, they manage it. So what they'll do is they'll either give more homework to the client and say, here's your homework. Get back to me when you're done. And then if they come back beforehand, they say, well, wait a second. We agreed you were going to do this homework before we move to someplace else. Let's either agree we're not going to do the homework, or let's do the homework. So that's how they manage the relationship. So we do have a number, but it's not a hard number. It's like, a range of what's acceptable.
And then how many companies at once can the Tech Futures Group work with? Is it limited, or?
It is, because of the budget. So last year we advised just under 200 companies. Since the beginning of Tech Futures Group, since June of 2012, we've around 800, 750, 800, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we've done quite a few. Most of the companies don't survive. This is the tech startup world. The vast majority don't survive. So they sort of tend to go away. What we have seen is some of them come back. So they've failed in this idea, but they really liked us, and then they have another idea, and they reapply under a different name because it's a different business. And that's fine, too. So
then, with the companies that you've worked with, what are your metrics for success? What do you want to see happen for you to say this was a big win?
Okay, so as I said, we're funded by the Small Business Administration in the state of California. And what they want to see from us are basically three things. The first is capital infusion, and the way they define that is any money that goes into the business that's not directly related to revenue. So in our case, it's mostly equity, and grants. But it does also include loans. We have done some loans, some pretty big loan packages, but they're rare. We don't do very many. So it's equity and grants. Since our founding, our companies with our assistance have raised about $125 million. So it's a good chunk of money. And that's over 6 or 7 years. And then the other two measurements sort of come after that, jobs and revenue. So if a company raises $1 million, or Service Aid, which raised 12, they're likely to hire people, so jobs is going to go up. They're likely to get to market more quickly, so revenue will go up. So for a lot of our companies, we're really focused on capital infusion. So in our world, again, equity and grants.
So we've talked a huge range of things today, from the entrepreneur in residence to getting grants to even screening the companies and working with them over time. But let's talk about, what advice would you give the entrepreneur out there, the one that first comes to you? What do you normally see? Well,
the first thing I say is, take a look at a Tech Futures Group. That always is the first thing I say. But what's important is to really understand your market. Right? If you can have an idea, or you can have even a technology, but you really have to understand the product market fit. So a lot of what we do, at least what I do as an entrepreneur in residence, is I make sure that they are talking to customers or potential, they aren't customers yet, but prospects, potential customers, a lot. So it's not a matter of 1 or 2 or even 5 conversations with 5 different customers or potential customers. It's 30, it's 40, it's 50. So I do a lot of, wait a second, how do you know that? So just go talk to, and then not rush, a lot of the companies that come into us, the majority, I think, say, I want to raise money. That's what I want to do. That's the only thing I want to do. And we say, well, you're not ready, right? You just simply aren't ready. You're a single person. VCs and angels don't like to invest in single people. They find it very difficult to justify. You don't have a good product market fit or good idea of the product market fit. They don't like that. You don't have pilots anywhere. Your technology isn't ready. You're not ready to raise money unless, you're a very experienced entrepreneur that's made a bunch of VCs wealthy. Then they'll talk to you. But if you're not in that category, then it's hard. So we say, let's get you ready. Make sure you've got everything in place.
Now, a company like that, are they even too early for Tech Future? Do you ever say, come back to us in 6 months?
Sometimes we do. But so we're authorized by the SBA in the state of California to work with companies or entrepreneurs at very, very early stage. Say a researcher out of Sandia or Lawrence Livermore or Berkeley Labs, right? Technology that's mostly built, no idea of product market fit, no corporate structure, it's just an individual. Very, very rare. So we can work with those. And we can also work with companies on the other extreme that's been around for 10 years with revenue. Their needs are very different, but we work with them as well. Our sweet spot is 2 or 3 people, so it's not a single individual. Beta product or better, a good understanding of the product market fit. Then they're ready to move to the next step. They're ready to raise money. They're ready to make sure, to get ready for that whole stage.
And Gerry, please tell the audience, how is the best way to contact you or to find out more about Tech Futures Group?
So, go to our website, techfuturesgroup.org. My contact information is on there. You can send me an email, Gerry with a G, at techfuturesgroup.org, and be happy to respond, set up a time to talk. You can also call my associate director, Edgar Cerrone, whose email is edgar@techfuturesgroup.org. So that's the best way.
And we will have that contact information in our ebook and on our website. And Gerry, 20 seconds. One last word of advice for a startup founder out there.
Get to know your market. Really understand who's going to buy your product and make sure you have that down cold.
Gerry, thank you for your time here on Silicon Valley Successes. Everyone, please stay tuned for our next week's episode where we're going to have Carlos Reza here from the Small Business Development Center. It's going to be an amazing episode. Have a good night.
Yeah?
Thank you from all of us at Silicon Valley Successes. We hope you found the information presented today useful in your path to success. For further information on accessing the resources in Silicon Valley, you may visit us on the web at siliconvalleysuccesses.com, on Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you. And remember, we want to help you in your journey to become the next